Hello, I'm John Scholes, President and CEO of the Downtown Seattle Association, and I want to welcome you to the second episode of the new podcast series that I've launched, Seattle City Makers. And in the series, I sit down with leaders from across our city to discuss with them the influence and impact that they are having on how we experience Seattle, both today and in the future. And I'm joined in this second episode by Bernie Griffin, the Fifth Avenue Theater's Managing Director. Our conversation comes to you from the Skinner Building, which is home to the Fifth Avenue Theater and the organization's administrative offices. A gorgeous historic building in downtown named after David Skinner, the investor in the building and the owner of Skinner and Eddy Shipyard back in the day, and sits on the University of Washington's Metropolitan Track. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Bernie Griffin, Managing Director of the Fifth Avenue Theater. I'm here with Bernie Griffin, the Managing Director of the Fifth Avenue Theater in downtown Seattle. Bernie, thanks for spending time with me and coming on the Seattle City Makers podcast.
Thank you, John, for having me. I'm delighted.
You've had a long run at leadership here. You started in 2002 and were promoted in 2010 to the Managing Director role and have grown the theater and organization quite significantly over the last 10 years or so. I don't want to dwell too much on kind of where we've been over these last 2 years necessarily. Right. I think we're all ready to move on, but the arts and cultural sector and theaters in particular were pretty hard hit by this global pandemic. Take us back to March of 2020. Put us in your shoes and the decisions you had to make and how you made them with your team and just what some of those impacts have been.
Right. Well, we were really advised along the way pretty robustly by Dow Constantine's office and Kate Becker, who works in his office and who is the advocate for the sector. So they were with us pretty much hand in glove. And so we knew what was coming down as far as large gatherings of people inside and all of that kind of stuff. And I remember thinking, what? You've got to be kidding. How do we even manage this? How do we even try and get to whatever the other side is at this time? And so it happened, as we all know. And, pretty quickly, Bill Berry, who's my partner here, our producing artistic director, and I made those difficult decisions right away as far as declaring force majeure on our union staff. I never even knew what that word was. I probably mispronounced it a few times. I think I called it force de jour, force majeure. I didn't know. I became, unfortunately, I became very well acquainted with that phrase. And it was
a helpful phrase for many back then, right?
It was. Yeah. It was. And yet, heartbreaking for our staff and what that meant to our creatives and our admin staff. And so we cut the staff by about 75%, probably similar to, DSA. We didn't know what was happening, and we wanted to make those difficult decisions as quickly as we could, and we did. And it was challenging because these are folks you didn't want to say goodbye to. They were part of our team, and that's what happened. And we kept making plans. And then the plans changed. And, initially we thought, we'll be able to do a concert in July. We'll do a concert of Sister Act, which was a show that we closed down on, and we'll be able to do that. Well, we know that didn't happen. But somewhere along the way, probably in June or July of 2020, we really pivoted and said we are going to pivot to a digital season. And we are going to ask our subscribers who subscribed into a season that never happened if they would stay with us. And the majority of them did. And, I think that speaks to the level of fondness that folks have for the Fifth Avenue Theater. And it also provided us an opportunity to stay engaged with artists and artisans along the way. Obviously not at the level that we normally would, but at some level. So we could continue to tell stories in what the new world looked like. So I would say it was our subscribers, it was our contributors, our patrons, and it was the federal government that helped sustain us, at least initially, through the first rounds of the PPP and then the Shuttered Venues Operating Grant.
And some local money in there too, right? And you talked about Dow's
King County
leadership and King County.
And that was just recently.
Yeah.
That Survive and Thrive from King County came out just last week, and so that is a big influx. So it was the federal government support of this sector we hadn't seen since FDR, and then of course Dow and his leadership and Kate Becker, and I can't say enough. And interestingly enough, the Shuttered Venues Operating Grant came about with this woman who ran the venue where Prince used to perform in Minneapolis. And she went to Amy Klobuchar and said, so it was similar to the Showbox here in Seattle. We're dying. And especially those venues that didn't have subscribers, didn't have patrons, didn't have contributors, were in a world of hurt. And so Amy Klobuchar and Chuck Schumer really were the patrons of this bill that have helped the sector both here, locally, regionally, and nationally. Game changer.
Did you turn to your colleagues in other parts of the country for therapy throughout all of this? There's a strong community locally, but were you leaning on others around the country? And
I think, yes, for sure. For sure. We have many organizations, like DSA, many organizations that we are members of, both for musical theater and both for theater, regional theater, across the country. So there were a lot of sessions there. And then, a lot of sessions in relation to the social reckoning that was going on in our country and specifically our field. And, to be honest, how we open now looks a lot different than when we closed in March of 2020. All for the good. It's about centering the artists and the humans. And, there's a phrase in theater that says a show must go on. And I'm married to an actor, Sean Griffin, and he said, an actor never said that. An actor has never uttered the words "a show must go on." It's the producer who says that.
The one's calling the shots.
Yeah. So it's trying to do what we do, but in a different, more humane kind of schedule for all of our workers.
So it's not the first time the Fifth Avenue's doors have been closed in its history.
Right.
Did you find yourself going back to, read and learn and think about those previous periods to, maybe give you some hope and optimism in dealing with this most recent period?
Yeah.
And maybe say a little bit about those previous times where the Fifth faced some rough waters.
It has been part of the journey of the Fifth. Of course, I think you're talking about when it closed in the 70s, when it was, in the early days in the 20s, a vaudeville movie palace, and then a movie palace, and then, the sprawl of the suburbs and Cineplex Odeons and movie palaces were on the decline, as we see around town. And it closed. And there was talk about, cutting it up to a bunch of little theaters, making it a Chinese restaurant, demolishing the Skinner building, of which we are a big part of. And it was really that group of folks who brought the World's Fair to Seattle that, interestingly enough, turned their attention to the next priority, which was the state of downtown. I always say, I went to school down at St. Martin's in Lacey in the late 70s and the early 80s. And we would come up to Seattle and go to the Frontier Room because it was gritty. Mm-hmm. And that's the way it was. And that's the way it was in those early days. And then, the Fifth was the pioneer of a cultural organization downtown. The Paramount was here in a different form before it was renovated in 97. But then during the 90s, that's when, the Art Museum moved from Volunteer Park. ACT moved from Lower Queen Anne to downtown. Benaroya, of course, I was working for the symphony at the time. And that was such an influx of arts and culture into the downtown core.
Into the core. At the time when the retail core went through a rapid change.
Exactly. Well. Shout out to Mayor Norm Rice. Interestingly enough, for Benaroya was supposed to be on Lower Queen Anne, where Teatro Zanzana used to be. And Norm also knew that this was about the revitalization of downtown in the 90s. And so worked with the city about moving the concert hall to the space it is now.
Yeah, we've benefited greatly from having the proximity we do of arts and culture, and then, of course, sport.
And all the stuff at Seattle Center.
Yeah, Seattle Center and the arenas and the stadiums. Yeah. So many cities where everything's sort of spread out and doesn't contribute to that vibrancy and that walkable experience.
Yeah.
Not here.
Yeah. But as far as the Fifth, since then, the Fifth started as a pretty much a touring house, because before the Fifth reopened in 1980, there wasn't a venue for touring shows to come to in Seattle. They could go to the old Opera House that had the 4th of July and Christmas Eve open. And because even then, it was a venue that the symphony was performing, the ballet, and the opera. And so the Fifth was, a nonprofit. It was much more of a touring house and a producing house that it is today.
What for you, from a leadership perspective, what leadership quality did you have to lean into or adapt or evolve, develop in leading the organization through these last 2 years of leading your staff and the team? And is there a leadership quality that was sort of front and center in your mind?
Well, I would start out by saying, I am a member of a team, and the folks that don't get I'm one of the representatives of this organization, and it's an honor and a privilege to be that. But there's a whole lot of people that folks don't see. I think all of our folks in guest services, marketing, philanthropy, IT kept us going from home, finance, maneuvering through shuttered venues, operating grants, all of that kind of stuff. It was an opportunity for me to be a part of this amazing team that is helping to lead, the leading cultural organization in our region to the other side. Whenever the other side of this is, it keeps changing. But I would say, for me, and this is what I, tried to, share with other folks is, we show up every day, we do the best that we can, and the rest will take care of itself. Even when you don't, it's just a good life lesson. Right. It's, you don't know what's around the bend, but, to this point in my life, everything's been okay, right? Things take care of itself if you show up and suit up and do the work in the next indicated step, and the outcome will take care of itself.
Sounds like a great approach, given all the uncertainty we've had to live with over the last 2 or so years.
Not that I did that every day, but that was, in hindsight. Yeah, as I got, after, kind of listening to the news all weekend, and then it's like, but, if you don't freak out, you're not human either.
And there were some silver linings in this period. You got to do some remodeling work. A lot of people were remodeling their homes and their yards and other things, but you got to do a little sprucing up of the theater. What's different today? What kind of work have you all done? Well,
of course, we've done a lot with air filtration and just that kind of thing through, which is a challenge with a theater that was built in the 1920s, right? And all these kind of nooks and crannies around. But the big job is the new seats and carpet. And so those seats had not been replaced since 1980. So it's kind of like the gum wall. It's a really gross statistic, yet kind of interesting as well. Like 9 million tushies have sat on those seats. Like the gum wall, it's like kind of gross, but it's like, oh, that's really interesting. And so we were able, this was a project that we had received some state funding for it. And it was, I'll tell you, it was stop and start and stop and start. And then when we received some federal support, we knew we had the confidence to move forward, and knowing that we needed to continue to fundraise. So, and knowing that we weren't going to have the theater again for a 14 to 16 week period of time that we could do the work. So starting in about July, it was we are moving forward. And so we had all of the plans. We had we had all of the stuff in place, and we were able to move forward. And JTM was our contractor. They were amazing. And Alan Maxey, who was our facilities director, who was one of the positions that we let go during all this, he came back and worked on this project. It was a labor of love. Gregory Martin, who came in as our new facilities director in August, and it was like, here you go. Here's a big. We've got to get this done. And there were concerns with supply chain and all of that, but the theater gods smiled and shone down upon us.
Did you wait to get rid of the old seats until you saw the new seats?
No, those seats,
in town?
Yeah. No, I mean, it was amazing. Those seats went out fast. Yeah. They were gone. We were saying, well, maybe we can put in Barca loungers or lawn chairs or something in there if it doesn't work out. But through good planning and through good program management, it all worked out.
And how did you all determine your reopening date? There were a number of arts and cultural organizations and venues that opened over the summer. You decided to wait And you identified a later date?
Yeah, we did. We did. And everybody did it. Again, this sector communicates often, and we share a lot of information. We share a lot of information on testing. We share resources. That has been fantastic, and things learned along the way. Our friend Josh has been going since about August between the three venues under Seattle Theater Group. We just decided that waiting until January was going to be the right answer for us. And knowing that if we were to do a holiday show, we would need to make decisions much earlier than we needed to make them in January. It was the date that seemed right for us.
Because you're producing and
so we started.
Big difference, right?
We started. So you start auditions in the summer and start getting the company in November, and then the union crew back the first December, and so there's a lot of lead time. It's like that duck and paddling really quickly under the water that nobody sees, but there's a lot of pre-work that goes into it when we're a producing house.
And for those who might not know, why don't you share what you're opening with?
We are opening with Disney's Beauty and the Beast. We thought we needed some comfort food to welcome back families and patrons in our downtown community to something that was familiar and beloved. And we've got an amazing cast, an amazing director, and trying to maneuver. Everyone's in masks downstairs. Every time I go into the rehearsal room, I need to take a test, even though we're fully vaccinated. And that was, a mandate for anybody to work here. And that's what we're mandating for our audiences as well. Right now, it's fully vaccinated or proof of negative within 72 or 48 hours, as well as wearing masks. And I will say, I was in New York. I've been there a couple times, once in October and once at the beginning of November for the opening of Mrs. Doubtfire that premiered here in December of 2019. And, I felt really good and really safe. Nobody screws around. Everybody's got their masks on. And we see that going to theatrical events there's no evidence that there's super spreaders of any kind because of the mandates and the protocols that are in place.
Yeah, it seems that it's working amazingly well.
Yeah.
Both in restaurants, but certainly in the venues. I mean, I've been to a number of shows at the Paramount and a few other places, and people show their cards, the lines move quickly, and people wear their masks.
I know. And how do you feel as an audience member?
I feel great. I just feel great to be back.
I know.
Sharing in arts and culture with other people. And, I mean, God bless everybody that produced virtual content, but it'll never replace showing up with people that are your friends or loved ones, and then enjoying that with them, but also with strangers. So
exactly. It's an odd thing. It's a communal experience where we get together with folks, some that we know and a lot of folks that we don't know, and share an experience that is only done once. It's live. It's a relationship between the audience and the performers that is pretty remarkable. It's
got to feel good just to have people in the building and the theater again and have that energy back.
I would say our first day of rehearsal was very emotional.
Yeah.
And it was emotional to welcome the union crew back. And, we're in a hybrid model up here as far as in the office and work from home, kind of 3 days a week here and 2 from home. And we'll see how that kind of rolls as we get into the new year and seeing what happens.
When did you go back to that or go to that?
Hybrid?
Versus, I imagine the administrative staff was all remote for a good period of the time over these last 2 years.
Yeah,
right?
There were a few of us that kind of like you, that just came in.
Yeah.
Because I know I would see you walking the streets of Seattle.
And you should mention you live downtown, have you and Sean for quite some time.
Yeah, we have. And so it's, all about like risk tolerance, right? So I think for those of us who have been coming in the office a while, this is just, and as people come back, it's providing folks the grace to have their own experience. But to answer your question, initially we thought it was going to be September, and then it was the Delta variant. And so we pushed that back to November 1. So it's been since November.
And what's the reaction generally to people that have been coming in? Have you noticed a change in just sort of engagement, attitude, culture?
People like being here.
Yeah.
I know I do. The conversations that you have in the hallway and, just that interaction between people.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. I mean, we're in that kind of business, right?
In a creative business,
yeah,
right? Yeah. It's like, it sort of felt like we coped well, but I don't know if we excelled either.
Yeah. What is it at DSA? What are you guys doing?
We've gone back since September to everybody in the office at least 70% of your pay period. Mm-hmm. And that has, I think, served us well. And of course, we, manage a big team that works outside and can't, perform work remotely, that are cleaning and managing parks. And so they've been showing up, feet on the street each and every day for the most part throughout this pandemic, although we right-sized our operations, when everything was shut down.
Right.
But, so, it's important to be back downtown, and it's felt great from just a cultural and personal connection.
God bless Mid.
Yeah, our team has just been great.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Every time I see,
keeping the city open.
Every time I see them on the streets, I thank them because they're doing an amazing job.
Well, I thank you for that.
Yeah.
You've talked about the importance of arts and culture to the renewal and recovery. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that? And then also, how is the fifth addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion? You mentioned, opening back up is we're going to look different and approach things differently. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the renewal and recovery, but also addressing diversity, equity, inclusion, how are you leading as an organization?
Well, I think as far as the role of the arts and culture sector in the revitalization of downtown, I think you see what it's like when we don't have, 2 million people coming into the downtown core. I think we'll see that, it's a dial. And we see, 300,000 people come into the doors of the Fifth Avenue Theater every year. And for every $1 they spend on a ticket, they spend $3 in our economy, whether it's parking or shopping or eating out or whatever it is. And it's such I think for many years we tried to tell that message to people, but until you see it,
or don't see it in this case, right?
That's right. Or you don't see, you don't really understand. And so we're all looking forward to contributing to making Seattle. I mean, this is our soul, right? Arts and culture are the soul of a city. You can have you can have business, you can have office buildings, which are, fantastic, of course. But, I think the new waterfront, I think the things that Seattle has to offer, I think that arts and culture, for a city the size of Seattle to have an opera company, a ballet company, and then to have all the, the bigger theaters, the mid-sized theaters, Town Hall, Spectrum Dance. I mean, it is incredible, the wealth of cultural organizations that weave the tapestry of our city. And it's not to be taken lightly or for granted, and it needs a lot of support. That's why, again, I will say Dow Constantine has been a friend to the sector like no other in our region. And again, I just want to, give a shout out to the King County executive for this on behalf of this entire sector, arts, culture, and science organizations as well. I didn't even talk about, Pacific Science Center and the aquarium, Museum of Flight.
Yeah, Mohi.
I love Mohi. Yeah.
Dow gets it and doesn't take it for granted, and neither should the rest of us.
He has been a friend, an advocate, and a leader for this sector that has been pretty remarkable. And then as far as, DEI, I think that, looking at our industry and the barriers that have been there so that all members of our community haven't been able to tell stories here at the Fifth. When we were talking earlier about, do you talk to colleagues across the country and regionally? I think that has been the major conversation regionally as an industry. And what do we do to ensure as a white-led organization, how do we ensure that moving forward, those voices and those perspectives, those points of view, those people have a place at the table. So it has been, looking at systems that have always been here, and it's like society, right? It's through no fault of anybody who has current roles. But now that we recognize and understand and had the time, it was after the murder of Mr. Floyd, and there was a call to justice across this country and this sector in particular, that it was, again, opening now compared to what we were is going to look different, because it has been saying there's a system in rehearsal called 10 out of 12s. And that means the actors come and work 10 hours out of 12. And then the stage crew comes in usually at 8 in the morning. So they're working from 8 in the morning until midnight for, 14 days straight. And I remember the first time I was working in theater, it was at the Rep in the 80s. And I asked somebody, what's a 10 out of 12? And they told me. And I said, why do we do it like that? And the answer is because that's how we've always done it. Mm-hmm. And so it's like taking a look at how we ask people to show up and how we ask people to do their best work. And folks don't do their best work when they're exhausted, and they're on the point of exhaustion, and the show will go on, and we've got to get it done, and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it is finding solutions to these situations through a racial equity lens. And when we look at it through a racial equity lens, we fix it for everybody. But that's where we start, and that's how we start to center the humans.
Well, thank you for that, and thank you for your leadership of this really important institution over the last 20 years, nearly 20 years, but particularly over these last two with the rough waters that you all have faced. If folks want tickets to Beauty and the Beast, I assume they can go online at Fifth Avenue.
It's the www, the World Wide Web, .fifthavenue.org.
That's pretty.
Yes, you can look at that and the other shows in the season. We have a full season coming up. Beauty and the Beast just starts it, and we have some new works, and we have some returning favorites, and it's a great season. And we're starting to work on next season as well. So, it's an exciting time, and trying to maneuver with new information continually, right? Even from 2 weeks ago and where we are now.
We'll remain on our toes, but look forward to
you bet
the doors opening up and seeing people spilling in the theater and spilling out and spending money in other parts of downtown, and the return of the vibrancy and energy that we so love.
And it'll happen.
It will.
Yeah.
As it has before.
That's right.
Well, thank you, Bernie. I appreciate you spending time with us on Seattle City Makers and all you do, and helping to make and shape this great city and this great sector and theater.
Thank you, John, for the opportunity. This was really fun. Always nice to talk to you.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Bernie, and we're just so fortunate in the city of Seattle to have people like Bernie at the helm of our great arts and cultural institutions and organizations, and hats off to her and the many other leaders in our community that have been at the helm of these organizations as they've battled this pandemic, which has had a really disproportionate and outsized impact on arts and culture and that sector and our venues and artists and performers throughout these last nearly 2 years. We should never take for granted our arts and cultural community, and I think we all appreciate that after watching what they've had to deal with over these many months and seeing those doors closed and those marquees dark. But it's sure great to have them back and have the Fifth open, as well as so many of the other venues in downtown Seattle. I really believe that our arts and cultural sector, entertainment, sports, they're really going to be the fuel of recovery and renewal for downtown Seattle. These are experiences that you just can't get anywhere else within our region in the same way that you can get them in downtown Seattle, and you certainly can't get them virtually or from behind your laptop. You've got to show up and experience performances and art and culture with others. That's the way it was meant to be seen and heard and experienced, and the laptop just doesn't replace that and never will. And so these venues and organizations and the artists and performers are really, I think, our key asset in downtown as we focus on renewal and recovery, to really amplify the fact that they're open, they're back, And you just can't get that experience anywhere else. You've got to come downtown. So grateful for Bernie's leadership and having the doors back open and artists employed and art being made again for all of us to experience. And as I do in these episodes, I want to close out with a can't miss in downtown Seattle, a can't miss event or moment or reopening or new business. And of course, I've got to close out with you can't miss not showing up to the 5th for Beauty and the Beast and taking in live theater again. So tickets available on the Fifth Avenue's website, as Bernie noted. And if you're not getting into the 5th, get into one of the other art and cultural venues and performance halls in downtown. Come support those artists and organizations that have their doors back open, whether it's the Paramount or the Moore or some of the other smaller venues or the new Croc. We all need to be showing up with our dollars to support these organizations that have their doors back open and that made it. I've just had a blast getting out again to see live music at the Moore, at the Paramount, and nothing replaces the experience of being with your friends and loved ones and enjoying art together, but as we discussed, also standing around a bunch of strangers for a shared experience. So I hope you get out there, support the Fifth and our other arts and cultural venues in downtown, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Seattle City Makers, with support from James Cito, presented by the Downtown Seattle Association, and production by Spark Creative.